when people talked about systems and processes before, it just seemed like they would think about this really boring exercise that very little return on their investments, so their energy. I like using the analogy. So one of my favorite watches, the Omega Speedmaster, the watch that like went to the moon and that stuff. On some of the models, they have a clear back and you can look inside and there's like 250 different pieces that they fit into the watch with springs and gears that keep the time. It's an amazing piece of machinery. I feel like that's the look that I get sometimes from business owners. And, oh, you want to create this? But the reality is you don't start there. It could be as basic as a checklist. And then how does that checklist connect with the other person's checklist? And if the other person can't do their job so then you're starting to get just maybe 2 gears. So if one gear stops, it stops everything. And then there's your indicator of something's off track.
Hello, everybody. This is the Winning in Winnipeg podcast, where I talk to top performing business owners, executives, entrepreneurs, and local Winnipeg celebrities. I get to learn who they are and how they think, and I get to hear their perspective about what's really going on in Winnipeg and their businesses. Today on the podcast, we have Jean-Eric Plamondon, the founder and principal strategic business advisor with his own company, Growth Strategy. Jean-Eric has bought and sold numerous companies in many different sectors and is incredible at dissecting people's businesses, their problems, and creating solutions to get them where they want to go. Not only does Jean-Eric use technology to simplify and automate business processes, he also is one of the most logical, calculated, and genuinely kind people I have ever had the pleasure to work with. Jean-Eric, thanks for being here.
Dan, thank you. I need to get you to send me that after.
It's not bad, hey?
Quite the intro.
You can use it.
Thank you.
You can use whatever you want. Okay, so we were talking before. We legitimately can talk about anything because I know you're deep. You're down the rabbit hole of pretty much anything that you ever decide that you're going to be. You just became, CMC, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was a fun little adventure. I found out about it through an associate at the squash club, and 3-4 months later, I got certified.
And that was because you are building a house on top of that?
No, I think the big reason is because I dropped out of university, even though I was on a full scholarship. So I dropped out in my last year and a bit of commerce.
Yep. And
in my youthful haste and arrogance, of course. And it hasn't really come back to bite me in the butt until the last 12 months.
Without that designation?
Yeah, without a designation or a degree. It did burn me a little bit once when I was, I had a company and I was selling a lot to the US, and I tried to move to the US, and immigration didn't like that I didn't have a degree. Everything else checked the box, and that was the first time that it kind of burnt.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so I already had the house in Minnesota and everything ready to go, and that stopped everything. And then in the last year, I became a certified digital advisor. And I had tried. Thankfully, I don't take no for an answer very well. So I was quite persistent, but The big hang up again was because I didn't have a degree. And so when I found out about the CMC program and looked into it, I realized that I had a lot of the qualifications to get in through the executive stream.
Nice.
And that in a lot of the ways, I believe, will help me kind of circumvent the lack of degree function. So
no, I understand. I've been looking at the PMP program.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But even to there, I think it's CAPM, Certified Associate, before that. And I think that is probably my next little designation.
That's a deep rabbit hole. I looked at that one as well. And,
I don't know if I'm going to ever be fully PMP. I don't know if my mind really likes to work that way. Because it's funny when we're talking with my engineers and project managers, they'll label things that I'm doing already. And they're like, oh, this is this. And I'm like, no, that's just how I do stuff. They're like, yeah, but in the textbook, this is what it's called. Like, okay, yeah, but it's just logical, right?
That's right. I mean, and you learn this stuff through trial and error, and this worked, this didn't work. And that's essentially how I've just started to discover a lot of my practices. Some of it is, best practice already. And if I would have got my MBA, I probably would have fast tracked that 10 years ago, but through trial and error, I kind of figured it out as well.
Yeah.
CMC has kind of been the same way as well, as I started to learn all these best practices and engagements and how to, like you said, dissect and help people with their solutions and problems. I'm learning that, oh, hey, I've already been doing that. And I had my own name to it. And so now I get to adopt and keep learning.
Yeah. You and me are really good at going down rabbit holes. And so I did take the liberty of writing some stuff down. Okay. However, we may only get through one or two of them, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was a little worried on the way here. I was thinking, oh, geez, like how deep does he want to go? So
as deep as we go, I suppose. Okay, so I want to give a little bit of background, who you are, where you came from, all that stuff. So growing up, were you always entrepreneurial? What kind of jobs did you have? Were you good at them? What were they?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so born and raised in Winnipeg, grew up in St. Vital. I don't know if I always had entrepreneurial streaks in me, but I guess there was always signs of like being resourceful and industrious in certain ways when I wanted to do stuff. I think that characteristic of not taking no for an answer was evident earlier on, and so. I was a fairly good employee in a lot of ways. Like I would learn the rules, I'd follow the rules, but then I'd learn how to, optimize things and circumvent some of the rules. I'd often get in trouble for it, but in the end, it usually got adopted anyway. So that was, flyer routes and all that fun stuff. But I had always an interest in technology, so I wanted a computer as early as like 10, 11 years old, and my parents wouldn't let me get one. So finally I had found an avenue through one of my teachers in elementary school where I could get parts for computers for near free. And then I just started learning how to assemble them and build them. So I had my first computer by age 12. And
crazy.
Yeah. And because I was interested in how do I get into those library computers that were always locked at school. So I'd found a way to like break the password and get in. And I guess I was always bored in school too. So I didn't realize it was boredom, but I'd always cause trouble, and I did all right for grades, but I was often in the principal's office as well. So
yeah.
I guess that is a bit of an entrepreneur, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes two of us.
Okay.
If I were to ask myself that question about entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurial, when I think about it, I really just don't like being told what to do. So I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna have to go do something by myself.
I don't mind being told what to do, actually, and that's one of the things that is probably a little bit different for me. Is I actually prefer to be, not on stage. I prefer to be behind the curtain,
mm-hmm.
and I liked learning and being told what to do.
Yep.
But I have this insatiable curiosity and desire to need to know why. Why are you telling me this? And if you can't answer it, I get out of the way. Now I'm not going to take instructions from you. And so, and that's been a theme that's, kind of stuck with me and sometimes haunted me, because sometimes I get too deep and too involved in certain things that I probably should not.
Right.
But it's also helps with figuring out problems and breaking barriers that, at probably a very young age, most people probably wouldn't have discovered. So,
well, they do say that the best kind of coaches are coachable themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Take me through some of the businesses that you've bought and sold.
Yeah. So the first one I actually got into as a franchisee for College Pro Painters, and I'd found them through commerce, because I was already taking commerce courses in U1 at U of M, University of Manitoba, and it was really interesting because my family comes from a long line of like painters. So my grandpa was a master painter, like in the trades. My dad and uncles were all painters as well, and so I had grown up painting as well, just
in the blood.
And so I thought, oh, this is cool. I want to learn how to run a business, and I already know the technical component of this business. So to me, it was a way to kind of cross that bridge into that world. Fortunately or unfortunately, a really popular TV show at the time was The Apprentice with Trump, and it was like the number one show for like the longest time. If you weren't around at that time, you're rolling your eyes now. But if you do remember that time, it was popular, and it definitely influenced a lot of people to go to commerce. And so I wanted to get into business, and there wasn't actually I didn't know anybody that was a business owner. I knew only like a couple like distant friends of my parents that were business owners, but that's it.
Right.
And so I didn't have that mentorship. I didn't have that I didn't grow up in that type of environment. So I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to go learn how to run a business. And so College Pro was the first one. I signed up when I was 17. I had to get my parents to co-sign because I wasn't legal age to actually sign the legal contracts, and that it was good. It really woke me up and started to smarten me up to some of the real things about the world.
They're pretty processed there, hey?
Yeah, it's a really great program. It taught me that I wasn't really good with people at all. And so it kind of led me down a path of self-exploration, reading books like How to Win Friends, Influence People. I was horrible at making eye contact. I was horrible at telling everybody how they're wrong and why they're wrong. And I was really good at finding out why they were wrong, but I didn't realize that people didn't like being told that. So it was a really painful, I think I had the lowest closing ratio in College Pro Canada out of all the 100 and something franchisees. So what did I do?
Still a record.
I was like, I think I had like an 8% closing ratio, and the industry standard is like 30 or 35%. So what did I do? I just did 3 times more estimates.
I was going to say more calls.
Yeah. I worked my butt off, and I still got frostbite injuries in my hands to prove it. Estimates year round, it was a really good learning experience. There's still things that I've learned back then that I implement and use to this day.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into growth strategy, how did it come about? Like, where did it start? What does it evolve to?
So I was a part of a couple programs. One of them was basically a form of an MLM when I was like 18, 19.
Okay.
And I wanted to learn more, again, just learn. So it's mostly a learning organization, but there was like a multi-level marketing product sales behind it, which was a fantastic way to drive a lot of my friends away.
I was going to say friends and family real fast.
Which, on one hand, it's really sad because it pushed a lot of those people away, but it also, when you're an entrepreneur and you put yourself out there, a lot of those people that are close to you and love you are also usually the ones that naysay and tell you not to do those things. And so I had already kind of pushed them all away, and I didn't have a lot of the naysayers around. So in part of that program, I had learned a lot about process and how businesses work. And that's ultimately how I stumbled upon my first consulting contract. Came in with a logistics company and saw a whole bunch of inefficiencies with paper and everything was redundant. So I came in, helped them in about 12 to 18 months, very informally, no methodology, no training, just kind of, bootstrapping, and help them reduce their employee load down from 3 in the office to 1 in the office. And all those savings went straight to the bottom line. And then I helped them with developing some sales training and scaled it up. So through there, it was a fun little experience, but I started to get the clients and vendors of that business starting to approach me for other things. And so fast forward, one of them brought me in. They were running this, a couple of e-commerce businesses, which back in 2008 was like, oh, this is really fun, exciting. So I got involved, and long story short, I ended up buying one of those companies from the owner. So the owner was like a typical startup entrepreneur, loved starting up ideas, coming up with ideas, but then would get bored of them. And so he was ready to shut it down. So I bought the business on a vendor take back. The business was in paintball. And I had never done paintball in my life. Okay. And here I am now buying the business. So vendor take back, just so everyone knows, it's I bought the business, but without putting any money down. So I got the owner of the business to sell it to me, but also lend me the money on a promise to pay them on an agreed price. And that's when I started to, and my love for technology was already there. And it's interesting. Like, we don't realize what we naturally are good at or what we gravitate to, because we just assume everyone else has that, right? So I started to implement things like CRMs and systems and automation. And keep in mind, this is back in 2008. So there's no website builders back then. There was like HTML code, and it was brutal. But what I ended up doing is I created a lot of efficiencies in there. I tripled the profits on this thing within a matter of 3 to 4 months. And we were the largest wholesaler of supply paintball goods between Toronto and Calgary. So we had lots of clients between there. And we were also retailing online, Canada, US. I was buying stuff from China, importing it, all that stuff. But within 9 months of buying this company, I had flipped it for 3 times what I had bought it for without essentially paying for it. So it's really interesting. Like, I put nothing in, did some work, paid myself along the way, and then all of a sudden made all this money. And I thought, well, that's really fun.
Huh.
I didn't really even know you could sell a business.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So, I had already been doing that with some real estate on the side. I already flipped a few properties, and I thought, oh, this is fun. So that's when I started to go down the rabbit hole and acquired a couple more companies. We had one of my eBay stores was the second biggest selling store in Canada at the time. And it was just really fun because technology was something that I loved. I wasn't afraid of. I was constantly willing to just step into the unknown and figure stuff out. So,
yeah. And it wasn't very trendy at that time. It wasn't in people's houses, right?
Like, to give context, like Amazon was still selling books,
right?
Only books.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's not the e-commerce that we know today. eBay was still a bit of a wild west. Yeah. And so, as a quick segue, one of the companies that I then acquired, we got into the hydroponics game. So people who want to do indoor gardening, so we had the lights, we had the tents, we also had the carbon scrubbing fan filters for people who want to grow, onions indoors or other smelly plants. Yep. And so we were wholesaling and selling that all across Canada, the US. It was great. I had a warehouse on the East Coast, West Coast. I had a warehouse now in China because I was inventorying it there. I had actually got an employee on. She was my business manager in China. So, there's this whole trend of virtual assistants now. Yeah, I've been doing that since 2009. So It was really cool. She ultimately became like my second mom. She was like, I called her my Chinese mom.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I'd go visit her, they were just fantastic. Still in touch with them today. But what we were doing in that business, and so I acquired another company, integrated with that first one. And what we were doing is we were selling fractional bullion. So it's, which I didn't even know what that was when I first found out about it. Okay. So most people would know it as coins and bars, but you actually can't call it a coin because the Canadian Mint, for example, like they own the word coin unless, anyway. So they're rounds and bars and of like basically precious and semi-precious metals.
Okay.
So we had everything from, the staples, gold, silver, copper, so all the precious, semi-precious. We had all the exotics as well. So like molybdenum, palladium, all these really weird metals that people have never heard about. Yeah. And we had all these various sizes and some of the stuff we were selling it as just basic trinkets or garbage, really. But the other people is that there was like a segment of preppers who believed that one day the currency was going to collapse and they were prepping so they could, exchange these little ingots for bread and milk one day. So anyway, so we had created a whole category on eBay.
For the crazies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was fantastic. And it was selling like crazy. And then wholesalers were approaching us because we had created a whole brand around it. Yeah. So I'd rebranded it. But one of our fastest growing segments was copper. And at the time, if you think back to the time, China was growing like 10% year over year as a country, which is massive when you think about the size of that country. Yep. So they were installing a lot of plumbing and a lot of infrastructure. Copper was going through the roof in that country. And that's where I was manufacturing. So I had just come back from a conference with one of our old mutual friends out in New York. And I had learned about the concept of vertical integration. And that's, the Rockefellers did this, when you basically, you look at your biggest suppliers and customers and you figure out how can I, who are my biggest bills? Who am I paying it to? And how can I acquire that so I can, the people I'm paying, is essentially going from one pocket to the other pocket of my own. Yep. I don't know if I explained that well, but when I looked at that, I thought, oh, okay, great. Well, copper is my biggest growing item. I can't acquire it cheap enough. Well, where do I get copper? And so after doing some research, I thought, okay, well, scrap metal is the place where you find copper. It's the cheapest form of buying these metals and commodities. So off I went down another rabbit hole and found myself in this little town called Zoda, Manitoba. It's south of Steinbach, Zhoda. I think population like 180. And they have a scrapyard there. And sitting down with this couple, I was trying to buy it from them. They're like in their late 60s or whatever. And trying to negotiate another vendor take back. 'Cause I'm still in my early 20s. I have no money. I don't have family wealth to lean on and no banks. I'll get to the beard in a second. And I got a baby face on top of being in my early 20s. So no one's lending me anything. So long story short, they go, well, if you really want this, we have a sister company out in Saskatchewan. Go check them out and see if you can make a deal. So sure enough, I find myself in Battleford, Saskatchewan. Fast forward 6 to 9 months later, I had landed a deal to a vendor take back, buy this business. Even if I just ran it the way it was, I'd pay for it in a couple of years. But they had a contingency. The contingency was, well, you're a city boy. I mean, I was dressed preppier than I am right now. I was in the middle of Battleford, Saskatchewan. So they're like, you're a city boy. This is a dirty, industrial, heavy equipment business.
Yeah.
And the closest I've ever been to a semi-truck was probably in traffic on, Keniston, at the lights next to a truck. I'd never been in one. And they go, well, you need to prove that you can run this thing if we're going to finance you. So I was married at the time, and I said, okay, honey, we're moving to Battleford. And she said, okay, in a bit. So she was trying to get her stuff ready to go, and we're off to Battleford. So they wanted me to do a 6-month stint to prove that I can run this thing. Thankfully, I had just finished reading a book on my honeymoon when I got married a year or two earlier. And, someone had recommended this 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss to me. And Tim Ferriss wasn't who Tim Ferriss is today. It was like he just kind of got on the scene. I don't even think he had a podcast yet.
Yeah.
And I'm reading it on the beach in Los Cabos. And I'm like, I don't know. This is interesting, but I don't know. Too good to be true. And sure enough, the guy next to me at the poolside goes, hey, how do you like that book? It's good. I don't know. Don't know who this guy is.
He's like, I wrote it. What?
Well, he's like, oh, you get the part where the hand glider, blah, blah, blah. Because that's my brother that Tim's friends with. And I'm like,
no way.
Stop. So we start chatting, and all of a sudden it just gave me this like validity. Like, okay, this isn't just another one of those books, someone just blowing smoke. So I came back, implemented everything. And so thankfully, by the time I was going to Saskatchewan, my company had already been running on a 4-hour work week. So I had all these businesses running from my laptop. So I thought, okay, well, I'm only putting 4 hours a week into those businesses. Let's just go get another one. Mm-hmm. And so I guess if we have time, we'll tie that in later. How did I do that and why? And so we did this 6-month stint. And so day one in Saskatchewan, I was sweeping the shop floor and had to go buy a pair of overalls and boots and gloves. And, then I learned how to drive a semi-truck, got my license in a couple weeks. I started driving excavators and learning how to load scrap metal, making deals with local industrial places. But we also started to figure out there's opportunities in other types of areas to buy scrap. We made a contract with Hyundai out of South Korea. We bought a container loader because we're still in the middle of the continent.
Yep.
So to ship steel overseas is tough, but we got a container loader so we can truck it to Edmonton, rail it to the coast, ship it over to... And so we did all this fun stuff. And I just do what I normally do, very unorthodox and no methodology, no real, written plan, no engagement. So I was still pretty young. And at the end of the 6 months, and they rewarded me fairly for my time. Two things happened. So this is a good learning lesson. The owner goes, well, John, they call me John, this was the best summer I've ever had. And I don't know if I really want to sell this thing anymore. And I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you implemented a digital scale system. You got a camera system. All of our drivers now know how to use iPhones. I got everyone onto iPhone 4s or 4Ss. Dating myself. And, everyone's taking pictures of their paperwork, scanning it in. We got a cloud system now. We got paperwork. I've got an optical character reader on the paperwork. Everything's like streamlined, and I got all these contracts, and everything's facilitated, and I'm running this whole business from the semi-trucks, from the operator of the loaders. And they go, why would we sell this thing? We're making more money. We've got less labor. We've got less headaches. He was napping every afternoon, and he goes, so I don't really know if I want to sell this thing anymore. So the price went up. And in a weird turn of events, so we had worked out a deal, but they had done a little bit of due diligence on me and my background because, they're going to be the bank and on 7 figures of loans. They wanted to make sure that I was worthy. And in an interesting turn of events, they had discovered my wife's secondary social media profile, and where she was posting pictures with her new boyfriend.
Okay.
And so that put a huge halt in the plans. And so they said, so
boy.
John, you got to figure this out. This is probably why she didn't come and move out here this summer. You need to go figure that out. When you do, give us a call and we'll make a deal.
Okay.
So fast forward, the marriage was over before I had, it was over. When I did come back and said, okay, like, how do we make a deal? The opportunity was done. But through the process, I had learned a lot of things. And so that company, we had learned that there's a lot of farmers in the area of Saskatchewan that wanted to get rid of their old equipment. And but nobody wanted it in the scrap business because everything in the scrap business is about weight and density. But farm equipment, as much as it looks heavy for the average person, it's actually just really tinny, or they call it popcorn scrap in the industry.
Okay.
So nobody wanted to deal with it. So what I had done is, with one of the partners of that business I was trying to acquire, him and I went out and said, well, I think there's an opportunity. There's got to be a better way. That's kind of the saying that has been following me throughout my journey here. There's just got to be a better way. And so we went and started off this company. And so we figured out, well, how do we retrofit a lot of this industrial equipment so that we can get it onto a farm site and go clean up the farms? We did a bunch of spoke tests, which is something I still use to this day. So figuring out what the market is, how can we acquire the business at an affordable rate? And we had landed on something. Of course, we had to bring it to a local steel mill. There's only one in Saskatchewan. And they were like, we don't want to talk to you. It's tough. It's a very close-knit old boys club, no tech, low tech industry. And of course, I don't like taking no for an answer. So finally we got a hold of somebody. I think it was the VP of this company out of Chicago. And they said, look, you got to leave us alone. I said, well, what's it going to take? Just give us a shot. What's it going to take for you to just give us a thought? And so the guy goes, well, you can bring 1,000 tons of steel in through our doors in the next 30 days. We'll talk. So, okay, challenge accepted. So we got off to the races and leveraged as many of those Capital One MasterCards and whatever we could to get the money going. We made a deal with the auction to get a 90-day, no payment, acquired some equipment all across the country, even down in the US. And we, in the first 30 days of the season, before the 30 days were up, I got a call and the guy said, who the hell are you and what are you doing? Where the hell are you getting this stuff? Because we had already exceeded 2,000 tons for the month. And so fast forward, we ended up becoming one of their biggest suppliers in the retail side of their steel mill. I think we peaked out at 27,000 tons in one season. So we took this company that was just fabricated out of nowhere, took what we had learned in one industry, retrofitted it for a different segment of that industry, and scaled that company up from 0 to 5 million in the first 6 months of operating. And so, there's so many lessons and fun things that we learned through that. But at the end of the day, what did we really do that I look back on now is, we had digital automation. We had a CRM in place. We were tracking all of our leads through geomapping so we can optimize our truck routes. We did a lot of really fun things that I love to tinker on and do. Mm-hmm. But, now having, gone through that process, having sold that company and looking at it from, an outsider's point of view, those were really the advantages that no one was taking advantage of at the time. So in all of that and where you are now, what are some of the biggest lessons that you would impart onto somebody that is looking at either getting into something, starting something, acquiring a business, anything? So there's a few things there. I mean, that business was a unicorn business. We had figured out an opportunity. We had found what a couple of my mentors call, we found our vein of gold. We're mining for gold and we found it. Mm-hmm. And at the time, still young, still in my mid to later 20s, and I was going through these things where like I wasn't having fun on the weekends or evenings. I was working all the time. I never watched TV, never watched movies, and all this stuff was going on. And I would go through these like philosophical, debates in my mind and go, well, is this fulfilling my purpose? And is this, what I really love to do? And, in hindsight, I would have, if I could talk to myself, I'd say, just shut up and get to work, because this is an opportunity that I don't think you realize how good it is. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to replicate something like that. And when you find something where you have market need, you can acquire the leads affordably, you can deliver on it very well, and that we were. Like when the only other few scrap people that were cleaning up farms were taking like 2 to 6 weeks to clean it up very poorly with a poor experience. We were doing it in like 2 to 6 hours, and paying up front and, getting reviews and the thing was just blowing up in a good way. So we had figured out our secret sauce, our secret recipe. Yeah. And in a lot of ways we were, the king of the hill in what we had, the little industry we had created. So, I would have continued to just double down on that. Next lesson is that I really invested in my people and trusted my people a lot, which in hindsight, that was probably one of my bigger mistakes. We really started to just create our own competitors. So we opened the kimono, we let them in, we let them see everything. And, we had one partner that I was bringing in who kept delaying things, legal. In hindsight, red flag. But at the time, I was like, let's go. Knew them from before. I knew them through the scene at church. I was very involved at church before, and let's just do this. We're good. And then in hindsight, they had really just came in, completely pillaged all of our intellectual property, accessed all of our vendors, customer list, took half our staff, and then set up a shop next door. Everything, like literally whiting out our logo on the top of the forms and just pasting in a crappy version of theirs. So, and that obviously hurt in a lot of ways. And especially when they started to claim that they were their own pioneers of the industry. And
right. Yeah.
Perhaps that lack of humility was another red flag that I oversaw. But so, in hindsight, it's important to build your team, but it's also important to, protect your IP. Mm-hmm. So I learned this through another conference that I had attended. Coca-Cola, for example, they don't have their recipe available just to anyone. And so what I mean by that is they'll have part A here, but no one for part A knows what part B is there. And, is it really that hard to replicate the recipe? But, they have their secret sauce. So right. I learned about that as well. And at the time I thought, well, you know what, we got a justice system, I can always take them to court. And that was another lesson of mine.
You learn that real fast, that's not the truth.
We don't have a justice system. We have a legal system. Yep. Possession is 9/10 of the law. The claim that I had against this, partner was well over a couple $100,000, well over. And then you can factor damages and all these different things. Mm-hmm. And it still wasn't even worth pursuing. So we have this thing called small claims court. I think the limit's like 10. It might have gone up to 15. Oh. And anything between that 10, 15 and, probably 250 and up is really just a black hole in the legal system. So really protecting yourself with, possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's been definitely some big lessons along the way, but besides the negative stuff, there's been a lot of really interesting things that we were doing that I didn't have the terms to it. Kind of like how we were talking about that with the project management and CMC. Yep. And that we had a lot of the ingredients for scalability. And so scalability is a kind of a buzz term. I think I'm hearing it more and more now, where business owners want to scale up. Yep. And really just meaning that, can you do what you're doing today 5 times the size in a year from now? Yep. And most businesses, the answer is no. We had figured out ways to do that by doing things like what I now call the cash flow delta. So how can we get from the time that we have to shell out money to either buy equipment or inventory or whatever your business is, pay the staff or whatever, to the time that we get paid, how many days is that? And there's a formula that I teach and help my clients and businesses learn about that. But the ultimate factor there is that, and most businesses, by the way, is 45 to 60 days. Really. Like, I'm not just talking about just accounts receivable. I'm talking about all that. From the time you shell it out, time you get it. Yep. Well, we had figured out how to get into the negatives. So we get paid before we even had to pay anyone else. Well, that's when you get close to that number, your business, you can now go into the infinites. Now, so we were able to scale very quickly. Because if you think about it, 45, 60 days and you times 5 that, what's that money worth? So for us, that was one factor.
I think one of the big takeaways is as you get older, as you go through more experiences, you start asking different questions and you start anticipating stuff that you never would have thought of before. And I know that that's very true in my rosy, optimistic eyes of jumping into things, just completely blind. Where now I'm a little more hesitant. I analyze more. I look for how can this business really get messed up, right? Where are the faults? Where are the holes? And I know that I told you I passed on an opportunity just a few months ago or weeks ago, really. And it was something that I was so excited about. And I think it's still to this day is an amazing product. And I think it has the market here, but it's just not the time. And I couldn't get the right answers that I needed for. And so it sounds to me like a lot of the lessons you learned was just hard experiences of either getting burnt or seeing stuff in hindsight. That sounds like now you're a little more cautious and asking better questions.
Absolutely. There's so many moving parts in business. And even though you can have 99% of it covered, and I'd like to think that I was fairly analytical and I learned how to build, scenario managers on spreadsheets so I can plug in like 25 different variables and look at how it would affect things. But, just the one thing, like trusting the wrong person, or maybe it's not the wrong person, but over trusting them with certain things that maybe led them down the path of thinking that they were more than they actually were in the whole scenario. And so, that was a couple of things that really helped me. I ended up joining EO Winnipeg, the Winnipeg chapter. So Entrepreneurs Organization, it's a global organization. I think I was like the youngest entrepreneur in Winnipeg to have joined, at least at the time. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me because then I got to speak with other business owners that were quite seasoned. Some business owners that have been in business for 30 years who knew nothing about my industry, but they had been through key employees that may have, or key partners that may have gone sour, or contracts that, even though it's all buttoned up tightly on legal. So that was where I started to learn about the black swans, the unknown unknowns. And oftentimes today now, after I'm done an engagement with a client, I'm retained just to be the advisor on the unknown unknowns. Yep. I've often been told that I've lived the life of a 50, 60-year-old entrepreneur by now. And I guess I have the scars and the wounds to prove it, but
not the grays in your beard, though.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm waiting for those to come so I can maybe look more, look wiser.
It's working already. There was a story behind the beard.
Oh, right. So when I got out into the scene to buy scrap metal from the farmers, I had a baby face and they wouldn't take me seriously. And so finally my partner at the time went, okay, John, you need to, number one, drop the scarves, drop the fancy glasses, no more nice colored shirts. You got to get a black ball cap.
No more ascots.
Yeah, no ascots. Yeah. And so those all stay in my closet in Winnipeg, and you got to grow a beard. And this is back in like 2012, 2013. Like beards were weird back then. They were very weird.
We weren't trendy lumberjacking.
Yeah, no. Thankfully, I think they're more acceptable now, but maybe even falling out of fashion. But, that really helped make me look older at the time. And when I ended up selling that company, I thought, okay, it's time to get rid of it. And I did. But everyone in my network was like, no, you're the guy with the beard. Like,
put it back on. Put it back on.
Including my fiance and now my wife, who's like, no. So, okay. So it's not part of, I guess, my calling card, because guys or girls in the business community were like, well, that guy with the beard. Okay. I guess
that's right. Yeah.
Sticking, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you're rolling all this in, and you've already had consulting, advising positions. How did Growth Strategy come about?
Good question. Yeah, so I had gone through, I've had a number of companies of ownership now, and I had sold Prairie Metals. That was the scrap metal company. And then we had gone into a couple others, and on the background, I was going through a really difficult divorce, and so that divorce was officially ended in about 3-4 years, but it had just been dragging on with custody challenges, and just when you think if everything's been put to rest, just more issues just sprucing up, and settlements upon settlements, and that was happening, and it just got really nasty and difficult on the personal side. So, long story short, lost custody or access to my son for 2 years because they had made some pretty wild and difficult allegations that took some time to sort out, just to figure out that they had made it up. Yep. Of course, without any consequence, but and I just got
legal, not justice.
Right. It was a legal system.
Yep.
I was fortunate that we had, I had the time and the resources to stick in there. Because I believe that my son deserved,
a chance
to know. Yeah. That his dad is there and cares and loves him. Yep. And so, whereas I've been told by a lot of my legal team that, most people wouldn't have had the opportunity to have done what I've done,
right? To
stick in there, which I'm grateful for.
Yep.
And so we had just got my son back in terms of access, and everything's was good, and that's when I realized, now's not the time to go and acquire or turn around another company. Generally
bring out the overalls again. And
yeah, because when you turn around a company, you're generally coming in and there's a little bit of chaos, problems, or there's just things to sort out. And that could mean long hours. It means you're always available, always on the phone. And I thought, now's the time to really double down and forge that relationship and be available. So, but I knew that I couldn't be out of the game either. Yep. I love the game of business and of figuring out difficult, complex problems.
Yep.
So I thought, I've already been doing this informally. It's time to do this as my primary, my formal. So I made a promise to myself, made a promise to my family that, I'm not going to go acquire and turn around another company. I'm just going to do this small consulting thing and live vicariously through my clients and their employees. There's something special about working and aligning the employees of the business. And that was one of the things I really wanted to continue and maintain. So that's when we started it. And, fast forward 4 years later, around 4 years now, the team has grown. So now we're at 7 people with growth strategy. I told myself I didn't want employees, but, I guess we are our own worst enemies sometimes as entrepreneurs. And, but it's been fantastic. The growth has been phenomenal, and the team has been great. So,
how did COVID affect it? Good, bad? Doesn't matter.
No, it did. It did. So, thankfully, I had developed a good network, and that was how I got started in it. It was just through my, I've really invested in the relationships throughout the years, and none of my businesses at the time had anything to do with my network. A lot of my network's here in Manitoba. Mm-hmm. And yet I had these Saskatchewan businesses or international businesses that, it's not like I had a Main Street business that could, I couldn't sell a supply to a local company, but I had built the relationships nonetheless. Okay. EO has been fundamental for that. I was on the board. I helped with membership, recruiting, member drives. So I got to meet a lot of the members through that. And that's usually how I was getting my clients. COVID hit, and I couldn't go to events, couldn't meet people, couldn't go for lunch. And a lot of the clients at the time thought that the world was going to end. So their budgets got slashed, and I lost 75% of my clients overnight.
Oh.
So that was a bit of a wake-up call. And so we had pivoted. And so we've started to work in an area where we saw a need for businesses. And so one of my mentors took me under his wing for a year and a half, almost 2 years, and taught me how to find grants and help businesses access them. And so he took me cradle to grave on a couple programs that turned out to be very complex, complicated programs. So those wage subsidies and rent subsidy programs, and complex in the sense that the rules just kept changing every 2 months almost.
Right.
And we had built custom software on how to do this analysis. By the time we were done, I think it was running 2,000 different permutations of these programs, given all the data. So we had built software where I can pull payroll data, rent data, expenses, throw it all in there along with sales, and it would cross-analyze it all these different ways. You know, if you've never seen an Excel spreadsheet crash, it's quite the sight. You know, it would take Excel 5 minutes to run just the computations. It was pretty cool. But that's essentially how we pivoted, and we helped almost 200 companies across Canada access all these grants, and some of them were loans as well.
Yep.
And so fast forward, realize that actually lends itself quite well to the process consulting systems automations part of our company, because a lot of the current programs out there right now are starting to focus and encourage that type of work. So these two divisions now tie in quite well, because now clients can approach us and get up to 100% of our services covered through these various programs.
Yeah. So in taking that in, who's your ideal client? What do they look like? And then what's their typical journey as they enter and start working with you?
Good question. So generally speaking, a lot of my clients are, you know, they're market leaders in their, you know, whatever their market is. So a common characteristic is that they have a lineup at their door of clients, proverbially, like metaphorically, and they don't necessarily want to grow, which I thought was ironic because, you know,
growth strategy.
I created the name growth strategy thinking that, being told that, you know, I was doing my market research. Oh, business owners don't want process. They don't want this. They want to grow. Yeah. So here I call it growth strategy. And now, ironically, everyone who talks to me in the early stages goes, just so you know, I don't want to grow right now. and so that's characteristic of a few things. You know, things are working and they're getting the results they want, more or less. But it's taking so much of their resources. Resources meaning their people aren't necessarily where they need to be. Their personal time in the business is probably much higher than it needs to be, and or their personal take-home income is not where it needs to be. Okay. So these are common characteristics, but people don't know where to go because they're kind of feeling up against the wall. There's unknown unknowns, and so it's hard for them to see if it's even possible to get, you know, across this chasm that they're trying to get across. And so I've developed some programs to help business owners at least see the light at the end of the tunnel. I often get statements like, oh, okay, well, you've done, you know, these different 10 different businesses across 7 different industries, and you've consulted for, you know, another 12 or almost 24 different types of industries and sectors, but you don't understand mine. You don't know my business. That's right. Yeah. So I get that a lot. Yeah. And it's especially fun when, you know, they're twice my age and they go, now, son, hopefully that slows down. It's like I get the gray hair, but nonetheless. I can take my kids for a weekend. That'll help. Yeah, I bet. Although you don't have any grays. It's coming. It's coming. They're starting. I've noticed a few. I keep it short. We'd notice. We would notice really quickly. So you have done different kind of coaching before, advising, consulting. How much of that work is mindset? Now, when you're walking in, like, is it like the other coaching you've done before? Is it different when you're working with these different avatars, these business owners? How much of it is mindset? I would say a good chunk of it is, but I think the way we would probably define mindset is could be where the variance is. Okay. So and just to clarify, I don't, nowhere on my website do I say coaching,
Right.
and I don't call myself a coach.
Yeah.
Although a lot of the things that some of the things I do would lend themselves to coaching.
Right.
And the big reason is just, I feel like there's been an insurgence of people out there that call themselves
20-year-old life coaches.
Right. That have yet to live life. So,
That's right, yeah.
Or experience it. So I don't, I just don't lend myself to that type of, so yeah, I don't call myself a coach. Although I think I personally have one. I have a coach that's gone through a lot, and they're much older, and they've gone through the things that I'm currently going through with scaling up my practice.
Yep.
So I do value it for sure. Now, in terms of the mindset, so what I would define as key mindset here is really, and this is what when I'm going in with a new client, I'm looking for a few things myself. So as much as I think they're interviewing me, I'm also interviewing them. And the key there is really that ability to be vulnerable and the ability to actually say things like, I don't know, and to have them be okay with not knowing. Sometimes I sit down and I go, how can I help you? And they just keep telling me about how awesome they are. And I go, that's great. So how can I help you? So that's a key thing. And it's okay to say, I don't know how you can help me, because that's fine. So it doesn't, when people hear mindset, they think, oh, it's because I've read all the books and I have all the knowledge, and it has nothing to really do with knowledge. It's just being open enough to go, okay, I'll trust you they don't have to trust me with the whole mile. Just trust me with an inch, and let's allow me to keep earning the next inch. And eventually it'll be a foot, and maybe another foot. And that's how we kind of build that relationship.
Yep.
If they're closed off and they have nothing to learn, then, that's when I make the call that this isn't going to work for either of us.
Right. Kind of goes back to that coachability.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If they're willing and open to it. Now with the amount of information there is out there, we're sitting next to a whole mountain of books here. We have AI on the computer that's now getting smarter than ever, easier to access now. Why should anyone think about working with a growth strategist?
That's a great question. So we've currently built 2 apps in-house that leverages the AI technology, and I'm amazed every day at how much more it can do. I was just working with my team this week on a few things, and I thought, oh, this isn't a good example because this is probably too complex for the AI, and it did figure it out. And I thought, wow, this is great. Right now, there's been no better time for the small business owner. And when I say small business, like less than 500 employees, because we have the tools and the technology that at our fingertips right now, that the future is now. And it's only going to get better, and it's going to accelerate so rapidly even from here. But we will have access, and already do have access to the same tools and technology that the big players have. So historically, like the Amazons who had figured out how to do e-commerce the right way. eBay was early on, but there were issues, and Amazon just figured it out. But they had huge, huge teams and techs and programmers and all this stuff. Small businesses are going to come in and start disrupting against players like Amazon very soon. There's going to be another Google disruptor in the next 2 to 5 years, very soon, and probably even sooner than that. And so now with small business, the key is not about and I see this, Chat GPT, where you can chat with the AI. I see people using it like Google. Tell me about a good restaurant. Well, it's not necessarily about, it can tell you about good restaurants because it's read 10% of the internet and it's learning how to read more. But it's not about that. It's about synthesizing and processing data based on past concepts.
Okay.
So you can learn a lot of good stuff from modeling and go, oh, this has worked here. This is how I could do it there. But really where an advisor comes in, and this is something I've been teaching now for the last couple of years, and I've been telling people in the next 5-10 years, this is going to happen. And I was wrong because it only took 2.
Right.
And so I'm teaching businesses, develop your data today. And so we talk about data being the most valuable commodity right now. And when I say develop the data, have that clean data. So
what does that mean?
So I worked for, I'll give you an example. So one of my clients had been tracking everything in a database for 30 years. And it was amazing. It was like a kid in a candy store for me. But one of the things we started to discover is that, data science goes deep and it's very hard and you can split a hair many, many times. And so it can get complicated and overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the challenge is that their data was not clean. So we teach a lot of the businesses on how can you have data that's accessible, that's actionable, that's actually insightful. Because where we're going next is how to model all your own data so you can build your own AI. Now, I don't know if that made any sense or if I should, yeah. Does that make any sense?
Dive into it a little bit.
Okay. Right now, for example, and growth strategy is just micro company compared to the clients that I help. But we're running about 50 KPIs, key performance indicators that we're tracking right now with clean data. Why? Because I believe in the next 1 to 2 years, I will be able to have my own AI system running within all of growth strategy's data. So for example, like sales and marketing, those are the easy ones.
Yep.
So number of leads coming in, lead source, cost to acquire them, cost to close them, how much time it takes between all of those stages, who are the better clients when later on in the project management stages when we execute on their projects, how does that affect their results in the end? So these are all things that we're starting to track already internally.
Okay.
So that one day you don't have to be a data scientist to go, whatever you want to call your AI's name. Hey, AI, what's the next move in my business if I want to increase profits by 10%? Or if I want to eliminate my costs by 10%? Because it will now have all the metrics to rely upon.
Crazy. Very crazy.
Getting there is the challenge.
Yep.
And if you don't architect it properly, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And so that's where an advisor, like a digital transformation expert, really comes in handy. Anybody can go install a CRM. There's like hundreds of them out there now.
Yep.
Salesforce is for the big players, very expensive, but there's like little guys like Sugar CRM, Pipedrive, Zoho CRM, although that's kind of a mid-market. But there's a lot of really good CRMs out there. Mm-hmm. But it's like a blank canvas. And if you don't set it up right, it's not helpful. And that's where experts come in.
Yeah. So other than AI, has there been many major shifts in technology? Is there any other, either the ways that the technology is implemented has changed in the last little bit?
The rate of disruption is increasing exponentially. And so that's part of the problems that we're dealing with right now is the more the more it can impede you as well. Mm-hmm. So we just made a decision on a new type of platform that we're going to run internally, and we're implementing it as we speak. And it's almost there, but there's always this nagging feeling of like, but there's this other one that's now getting, And so that shiny object syndrome is not, I'm not the only one to have it.
Yeah.
And so that's also one of the values of having an advisor that you could trust that understands your business first, mm-hmm. and not necessarily as a tech person first. And maybe we can talk about that, the dichotomy and the challenges, the tensions between those two. When they work well, it's proper, but it can be, there could be dichotomies that are challenges. What I'm trying to say there is that technology is just getting better and better. One of the challenges that we're seeing solved is how things talk to each other.
Okay.
So, the Zapiers of the world are starting to help this piece.
The connectors.
Yeah. So you don't have an island anymore. Before people used to have an accounting platform like the QuickBooks and the Sages into like all that stuff.
Yep.
Or Xero is a big player that's coming into the market. But that was just an island. You would log in, you'd put your sales invoices in, you'd reconcile your books, but it had nothing to do with your marketing for your digital ads.
That's right. We can export in a CSV
at best, but then it's like...
Then we got to take that data, scrub it, bring it in.
Scrub it, so it's a clean data issue. Yep. And then it's like, but are we tracking the right thing? And then by the time you're done, the data's already outdated.
That's right. Yeah.
It's so actionable, insightful. These are the challenges.
Yep.
So it's going to continue to accelerate at an exponential rate. The key here, and just kind of, if anybody is listening is having the same challenge as I am about this shiny object syndrome, it's important that you do your assessment on what you're looking at solving, and not just looking at the software company to help tell you what you need.
Right.
So that's where the value of having an advisor that comes in, understands the business first, and always knowing that another company might do one thing better than what you currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost of switching is just so prohibitively expensive. Not just the cost of implementation teams, but the internal costs, the strain on your employees and all this stuff.
Yep.
But that being said, it's starting to get to the point now where it's like vehicles, like those, the typical car that we have right now out there. There's not very many cars that are a bad car. Like you can go buy like any type of car and you'll generally be
relatively good.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's always lemons and issues that could come up. But back in the 80s or 70s, like you really had to do your homework, because there's cars that were just complete garbage, names that we wouldn't even recognize today because they just completely failed and people lost their shirt on them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're starting to get, in my opinion, with software, where a lot of them are, generally speaking, going to solve most of your needs.
Yeah.
So, making that decision properly, but once you're in there, just get going. Right. Because where it may not solve your needs, you can probably connect it through other apps like the Zapiers, or we use a lot with Integromat, who just rebranded to make.com. We use them to help connect the islands that don't necessarily connect out of the box.
Are there any trends that you're seeing in small business that weren't there before?
Well, the first one for sure, when I was doing my market research about growth strategy, I was told that business owners don't want to talk about process and automation. Yep. And it seems like that's all business owners want to talk about.
I didn't used to.
Yeah, really? Okay.
Not at all.
And is that because of some of my influence, or was that?
Yes. Okay. And I noticed the problems. And then understanding what processes actually did and what they do and why we have them and why create them and why create cleaner ones and simpler ones and why everything needs to be processed and how to implement them and track them and record stuff, and now getting into KPIs. And yeah. So I legitimately never wanted to even think about that stuff.
And why is that?
Well, I can see what it does.
But why didn't you want to not get into it before?
Well, I think I didn't know what I didn't know. Right? That was a big thing, is if you can't even have a vision for what things could be, then I have no idea. Right? So I think that one of the big things is speaking with someone that has that kind of not only experience, but the ability to kind of think bigger and paint a bigger picture and a bigger possibility of something. And then that makes you ask different questions and then think like, oh, well, how, yeah, that's right. How would I grow this? How would I get these things done, maintaining these same parameters, or decreasing certain things or increasing certain things, right? I would always ask questions and then not really understand how to think them through properly, or that there were things that I could use to create stuff. Like systems and processes was never on my mind 10 years ago. I think even in the last 5 years, we've come an incredible way since actually understanding that there's a better way to grow than just using a hammer and smashing through everything and just working harder and, getting more leads and sales and then just dealing with that. Right.
Well, so it's interesting you say that. And so in terms of trends, it's a great time to be a nerd, because nobody wanted to talk about that stuff. And now it's like everyone wants to talk about that stuff. And that's the stuff I've been nerding out on for so long.
I've been waiting for you guys.
So, Yeah, never been prouder to be a nerd. But the other thing is, when people talked about systems and processes before, it just seemed like they would think about this really boring, daunting exercise that returned very little return on their investments, so their energy.
Okay.
And so I like using the analogy. So one of my favorite watches, the Omega Speedmaster, the watch that like went to the moon and that stuff. On some of the models, they have a clear back and you can look inside, and there's like 250 different pieces that they fit into the watch. And that just with springs and gears that keep the time. It's an amazing piece of machinery. And so when you look at it from the back, and it's just beautiful, but it's like very complicated. I feel like that's the look that I get sometimes from business owners, and less now, but they go, "Oh, you want to create this?" But the reality is you don't start there.
Right.
It can be very simple. And I think you've seen this as well. It could be as basic as a checklist.
Yep.
Really, that could be like the starting point.
Yep.
And then how does that checklist connect with the other person's checklist? And if the other person can't do their job so then you're starting to get just maybe 2 gears. So if one gear stops, it stops everything. And then there's your indicator of something's off track.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that, helping people go, oh, this is a system. It's like, well, yeah, it's the most fundamental, truth. Like, yeah, when you boil it down, that's really what it can be.
Right.
And then now it's like, how do we connect it and make it integrate throughout the whole organization?
Yeah.
The other thing is when we hear SOP, standard operating procedures, I mean, I still get a little bit of a ugh when I hear that, because historically it's big binders and big manuals that take a ton of energy to construct. I've only met maybe 1 or 2 people who like making those throughout my entire career. So people who are generally making them don't like it, don't enjoy it. It diminishes their experience as an employee.
Right.
And then when you're done, it's hard to reference and find. And like, what are you going to leave it on everyone's desk?
Yep.
So it's not timely. It's not, when you're logging in to do something, you can't get it done. The last thing you want to do, especially if you're under a time crunch, is go find a binder and skim through it. No, you want to have that information at their fingertips. So we've leveraged technology and platforms where when you're logged into, let's just say QuickBooks, for example, and you need to issue a purchase order, and it's not something you do very often. Well, why can't you have something that's built right into the browser, assuming you're logging in, that goes, oh, click on the help, type in purchase order. It opens up a little manual with an embedded video that shows you how to do it here at this company, at Emmett Leo Homes. This is how we do it.
Right.
So it's right at their fingertips. And it's not a 3-hour video. It's a 2 to 3 minute video.
Yep.
So making these documentation as quickly as it is to do the task, and as accessible as even quicker than getting up and calling your boss or calling your coworker over.
Yep.
That's some of the keys. And that technology was only available, again, for the big players.
Yep.
When I was first looking for this stuff 10, 15 years ago, it was only, there was one company around, but you had to buy minimum 500 seats. It's like, well, how does a small business owner afford that?
Yeah.
It's like $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now you can get into that for like $10, $15 a year.
Yeah.
For an organization of like 10 people. So there's really cool tools. Again, so this is what I mean by like the small business owner, the playing field is lowered. So now the little guys can compete much quicker, much more agile than the big guys, while still leveraging the same types of tools.
Yeah. I remember when Loom came out.
Yeah.
And Loom was a big one, because I was like, do you know how hard it was to create a quick video to either show me talking or my computer or both at the same time? Like, ugh. Yeah, that was a big shift.
Yeah. And you can now integrate that stuff into an SOP. So you can just link to a Loom and all that fun stuff. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
What is something that you find you'd like your clients to know, or potential clients to know about you or your business that they don't seem to know?
Well, I think we touched on it briefly or already. The unknown unknowns are challenging for people to get past, especially if they're experts in their industry, especially if they're the expert at their own company. and they're often the ones calling the shots with all the answers. And so I did develop a program that could help with some of that. I have one starting up in a few weeks where I've got some business owners. I've been in business for 20 plus years. And I'm kind of getting those questions inadvertently, like, what is this going to teach me? Mm-hmm. And so what I've done is I've taken a 1-year engagement of doing a really in-depth strategic gap analysis on the company as a whole. So like, where is your company not scalable? Looking at about 8 or 9 different parameters.
Yep.
Data is being one of those parameters, but there's other ones as well.
Yep.
Cash scalability, employees, over-reliance, all these different things. Mm-hmm. And what I've done is I've condensed it now into a 6 to 8 week program where the purpose is not we're going to learn, plan, assess, and execute because you don't have time in 6 to 8 weeks. The purpose is you're going to learn, assess, make notes, move on to the next module. So that by the end of the 6 or 8 weeks, and ideally, and I asked all the business owners, don't take action until we're done because, we're our own worst enemies. There's things like dogs on.
Yeah.
And so, but nonetheless, and I'm guilty of that too. But the idea is that it's like now we've assessed where the low-hanging fruit is in your company. Mm-hmm. And invariably, startup entrepreneurs to, veteran entrepreneurs who take this program go, holy crap, huge blind spot has been opened up. Now we know where our objectives and priorities are.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing is sometimes people go to me, well, what can you help me do? And I go, well, what are your objectives? And they don't know yet.
Right.
So helping them, I'll also help you identify those objectives.
Yep.
If I can't get you a minimum 3 to 5 times ROI just on the first, in a year's worth of ROI of my services, mm-hmm. I'm not working with you because it's not, you should go spend your money elsewhere.
Yeah.
I usually do 10 times. If I can get grants involved, there's like 100 times ROI, which is fun. But that's how I look at it.
Beautiful.
Because if we can't measure it, why are we doing this?
Yeah. You're based in Winnipeg, but you could be pretty much virtual, right?
Oh yeah. No, I've got clients right now across country.
Okay. So why Winnipeg? Is it just family? That's what's keeping you here?
Yes.
If family wasn't an issue, would Winnipeg be home? Would it be a home base?
I mean, I love Winnipeg and I love our summers, our spring and summers and especially our falls, but I probably would move around a little bit in the winter. And
it's a big world.
And yeah, I would. I mean, Winnipeg would always be home, and I would always come back here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite thing about Winnipeg, other than the springs and the summers?
Yeah, we're like a small, big city.
We really are.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, just seems like, yeah, it's big enough where it's not too crowded, and it's small enough where you can kind of, I feel like Winnipeg is like 1 to 2 degrees separation. When you need to be, when you need it to be.
Do you find that there's any advantages or disadvantages from being from Winnipeg?
The big advantages for us is, the cost of living for sure, and being able to work around the world, but still live here. Mm-hmm. That's a big one.
Yeah. Do you think that plays on who people are, how we treat others, how we, like when you work with clients from bigger metros or from different countries or stuff like that, do you find that they interact differently, or are people pretty much all the same across that you work with?
We are a fairly conservative market here, I find. But I also find that once you establish that trust and that relationship, I think because we're a smaller city, there's just also like the trust runs deeper and it facilitates the relationship down the road.
Right.
Was it Stephen Covey's son who wrote that book about the trust factor? Basically, the higher level the trust, the faster things happen after. I find it's harder to get things started in Winnipeg. There's like a longer courting, relationship building process. But once you pass that, it's like, I come in, here's what I see, here's how it's going to look like, here's how we're going to do it together. And it's like, yep, no problem.
Here's the keys to my house.
Yeah, essentially. And I don't know if it's because it's such a small town. It's like, well, a small town, but and it's like we're neighbors now. Like, why would we? Whereas I think in a what I've seen in the bigger cities is like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. But then it's like at every decision point, it's almost similar to do it again.
Interesting. Where's your mind at when you think about marketing and even branding in your space?
I spent a lot of time and money on basically developing the brand and the marketing for lead generation, and 99% of its effectiveness was just word of mouth.
Interesting.
So,
do you think that's your sector? Is that, or that's just where?
I mean, because I deal with businesses that are, that have sales that range from, under $1 million to 50 million. Generally speaking, I'm still dealing with the business owners, and sometimes it's a matter of, do we hire a growth strategy to do this to get us a big return, or get braces for my kids or put them through college this year? So it's hard for them to make that decision. Whereas if I'm working with an institution, they're not making those types of decisions.
Yeah.
Now, hiring us will allow them to pay for braces and college and a trip after that. But that's the kind of decisions that I'm up against with my market for sure.
With before tax dollars.
Right. Right.
So, looking at your competitors or anyone in your space, is there anything that goes against the rest of the industry that you believe?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me earlier about like my ideal clients, and people often ask me like, what's my niche? And I tell them I don't have a niche. If anything, my niche is small business, and so I don't focus on just construction or just like software companies or manufacturing, although I have all those clients. So where I was going with that is that so there are competitors that will focus on a niche, and I think that's really good. So sometimes I have a client that will say, well, what do you think of these guys? And I go, hey, we do very similar stuff. They focus specifically in your industry. So they might know a little bit more, a little better about your clients or the unique nuances. And I think that's great. You will pay more for those guys because they can actually just charge more for that niche.
Right.
And I don't know if it's still on our website. I have a team redoing some stuff on our website right now, but at one point it was, I don't have an MBA and you're better off for it. And I think the idea there is that, you're not going to get these large reports that just tell you what you're doing wrong and how you should do it. It's everything we do is very practical, although it's now being backed with best practices through CMC and all these different things that we're acquiring along the way.
Yep.
The idea is that it's always practical. So it's helpful, insightful, and here's the actions that you do to get there.
Right. Yeah.
Keeping in mind as well. And so when you ask me about competitors, I don't actually know who my direct competitors are. I know who plays in these spaces, but I guess one of the unique aspects that we've been able to really capitalize on is that it's hard to compare us. We're not a commodity. There's an element of change management that we do. And that's one of our aspects of Secret Sauce. Yep. Not only do we do the systems, we make it so that the staff actually want to use them, which is one of the missing keys usually.
So to change gears a little bit, how have you found, where have you found a lot of success or failure when we start talking about balance in your life? Whether it's to do with business, family stuff, your health, your mind, anything like that.
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's interesting because I got into consulting so that I could, have more balance. And then here we are, where we're going through hockey stick rapid growth right now. And so, my work days are 6 days a week. And, when I don't have my son, I'm putting in the extra hours in the evenings, getting up extra early. So it has been a season right now because we are, we've got a lot of clients and we want to deliver well on them. And I'm also training and developing our own systems and processes. And so I think the key there is knowing that it's a season. And it's already been getting better. Like we've had some we had some growing pains over the last 4 or 5 months, big time.
Yeah.
But
growth has a funny way of doing that.
It does. It does. But like one of the analogies, and I've had some friends and people who care about me that go, you really got to slow down right now. Like this is getting crazy because, and I have a fairly high capacity to work and push through things. So, but for some people looking in from the outside, they go, holy crow, you got to slow down. And the analogy there for me was, if a plane on the runway in the last quarter of the runway hits the brakes, it's not going to go well.
Interesting.
Because you're going to run out of runway.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to stop, and you're not going to be able to pull up and get off.
Right.
And so that's kind of where, keeping in mind, like that last little part right before the wheels lift off the runway, it is a little bit shaky and it is a little bit much until finally you get off.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the idea is like, okay, this is a push. This is a sprint. We got to get to cruising altitude, and then we can reevaluate.
Apply the Pareto rule and see where you need to double down. And so who or what have been the biggest influences in your life, whether it's mentors, books, places?
Well, I keep looking at it. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I see it on your shelf there. I read that thing so many times that the spine of the book fell apart because I first time I read it, I thought it was a joke. And I thought that was like on camera because it was like every page I was doing the absolute opposite. Every page. And I
tell people what they're doing wrong all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was like, oh my God. Like, oh man, I can go on about that. So that was like the most influential change for me.
Yeah.
But I think the next part was that I went through I was really fortunate. I got into a program, a psychotherapy program where I was able to sit down with a professional for once a week for 4 years. And there's a lot of things that came out of that, but the biggest thing for me was that I established at a young age that, and for a variety of reasons, but that I couldn't trust myself and I couldn't trust my intuition. And so I leaned on other things to supplement that, ultimately that lack of trust in myself. So my bookshelf was huge. I had multiple mentors. I had people I could lean on, and all those things are great resources. I'm not shooting that down, but the one of the statements that I reflect on daily is the answers are within. Because I would often find ways to not just sit down and deal with it internally, and instead occupy myself with external pieces of input.
Right.
And while those are important by far, it's also important to listen to yourself.
Right.
So,
well, it's taking all those in and then creating it for your specific thing. And the question, what do I want, deviates for everyone, right?
That's right.
So, you can take 10 different people can take the same stuff in and the same problems, but what they want out of the situation could be completely different, which then the solutions to those problems have to be completely different. And I too, I very much relate to you as far as not trusting yourself or your intuition, or thinking that somebody else would have a better answer or a better solution or any of that. I totally can relate. I think the therapy that I think everyone should be in therapy, first of all. And second of all, like my life has completely shifted once I started asking more, getting into therapy, but also doing more therapy related things. You know what I mean? Like awareness or meditation, or just even asking different questions or listening. Listening was a big one.
It's interesting you say the listening component. It's unbelievable the percentage of business owners that have a form of attention deficit disorder. and they've all lumped it together as ADHD now. So I read a book by a Canadian author and doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate, and he's phenomenal. He's great. And so it was essentially one of his books that he wrote on ADD and ADHD. And I was reading about it for my son. Having two parents that are entrepreneurs, probably a good chance that he had ADD and some struggles with school with one of his teachers in 1 year. And through the process, discovered not only does he have it, but so do I. And ADD presents itself in many different ways. So, I'm not sitting here with my legs jiggling and I'm able to actually sit here and listen. But so there's some people will go, how are you ADD? Or, when I'm really focused with business stuff, people go, but you're really focused. I also love it. So that to me was something that, through the process of trying to get things figured out for my son, I got diagnosed myself as ADD. And I learned a lot about there's a lot of benefits to ADD, and there's also some challenges that come with it. And so I did my research and overcame some of my unfounded stigmas against getting onto ADD medication and figuring out what worked for me. Of course, I nerded out on things.
Yeah, you did.
I have like the ring and the smartwatch that track the quality of my sleep, because that could be one thing you want to look at. And finally landed on the one that worked for me. And so that helped me tremendously, just being able to slow the thoughts down in the sense that I can actually now listen. Right. Slower is faster in a lot of ways. Right. So yeah, listening has been greatly increased with, understanding and developing that side of things.
Yeah. So you knew you were coming on. You didn't really know what we were going to talk about. Is there anything that you want to talk about, or is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have in relation to your business, where you see things, where you see Winnipeg?
No, I think thanks for promoting my company and all that. I think we did a lot of that, and I appreciate it. We didn't have to do all that. So I think we talked a lot about my business, and I like nerding out on technology and how that can translate to so many useful practical applications. And I think we talked about that too. And it is truly an exciting time. I think there's going to be some big shifts and disruption. I do think the market is going through a bit of a correction. I don't know how long that correction is going to happen. So I think business owners, especially, and I know this because I'm working with them, are going to go through a shift as well. And, maybe branding with growth strategy will need to change, where business owners are soon going to start looking at ways to be efficient, streamlined, do more with less.
Change it to nerd strategies.
I like it. Like Nerd Squad, but nerd strategies.
It's not bad.
I love it.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's, what else? I mean,
what's something that you would, you've worked with a lot of businesses. You yourself have gone through a lot of different experiences. If you were starting over, taking not only yourself, but all these other businesses that you've worked with and all these different kind of entrepreneurs and business owners and all of the crazy characters that you have to deal with, what is something that, like, whether they're 18, 20, 25, they're coming up, they're trying to find their, I don't want to say purpose, but they're trying things, right? They're listening to a podcast about Winnipeg and business. What's some advice that you would give somebody like that?
I mean, generally, I think, I've changed my career so many times. I mean, my career as an entrepreneur is essentially, I guess, my career, but the industry and the areas that I've worked in has just changed so much, from industry sector, type of work, type of clientele. And, I remember having this conversation internally throughout my 20s, like, oh, it's too late to change now.
I'm stuck now.
Yeah,
the next 80 years.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, because I've always had interest in engineering, and I probably should have done some sort of, like, in hindsight, probably should have done some sort of like computers science, data science program or information technology program if I were to restart it all, but that's because of me, and that's what I've always loved to do. And I told myself in my 20s, too late now. And then I look back and it's like the amount of things that I've done so quickly since then. It's like, it was not too late. In fact, it's still not too late.
Yep.
That being said, I have looked at things like an MBA and went and dove down into it and talked to people who are recent graduates from excellent schools around the world. At this point, what's the return on my investment for that?
Right.
And that it wasn't there for me because
it's been diminishing as you've been
right. I think it's a great
growing in
accelerant.
experiences. Right. Yeah.
It's a great accelerant, especially at my early age, before I went through all these experiences.
Yeah.
So now, instead it was like, okay, well, where can I get a lot of lift on my next learning opportunity?
Yep. Yep. Well, that word right there, learning, right? So as you go through all these different experiences or sectors, or, there may be somebody that looks at it and thinks like, how does one apply to the other? But really, and I don't, it's not just entrepreneurs, right? It's everyone. Like we're learning. It's the learning blocks, right? That we're learning and putting into our foundational understanding and experiences of who we become. And to me, that's just like, when I look at what we do right now in building, luxury custom homes, it constantly evolves, and there's different things that you learn and different skill sets and mindsets and business opportunities and vertical integration and all that stuff. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned was from other industries and working with different people or from past jobs that I've had that have helped me do this. So yeah, I'm one of the things that I'm taking from that too is try things. Like, don't be afraid to try things, and it's never really too late to make a decision and dive into something.
Absolutely. I think, to speak to the question, like, let's say I was like speaking to my 20-something-year-old self who was asking like, what do I do next? What do I do? I think one of them would have been go learn a methodology for productivity. And so, like, for example, like David Allen wrote Getting Things Done, which is a way to basically just process a lot of incoming requests and information and categorize it in a way where it's actionable and not overwhelming. That was something that I struggled with for a long time. And I think there's always a continuum on those things where you just reach it one day. And I also, do think that some of those systems can also be overly, it could take more time than it saves as well if you take it too extreme, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think the key there is balance, but I would learn that, we are, especially post-pandemic, we are in a world where, there's just so many meetings, so many emails, especially now with automation and all the text messages and on WhatsApp and Slack and it could be really overwhelming very quickly. So having that personal productivity system, like Getting Things Done, or there's a bunch of other ones out there, but that's one of them that I would learn because you can implement the fundamentals pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah.
That would be helpful. And I think the last component is we are now moving into a space where the knowledge is not as valuable anymore, but it's conceptualizing how to use the knowledge. So things like learning how basic programming works, like whether it's Python or whether it's something like that, that is going to be the ability to understand logic in programming, even if it's just a spreadsheet into Google or Google Sheets. I mean, that is fundamentally where we build a lot of our prototypes. Because it's easy and an interface to work with, and then you can implement it somewhere else. That is a tool that I don't see going away for a long time. Yeah,
absolutely. We could probably keep going, and I think that we're gonna have to have you on after a little bit here, diving into your course.
Yeah.
That'll
sure.
be, I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks so much for making the time for us. And I really appreciate being on. I also appreciate working with you and getting the experience and knowledge and availability to you, and the way that your mind works and dissects things and the nerdiness of it. And it's just, I love every second of it.
Pleasure. Thank you. Likewise. Thanks for having me.